Today we have with us Vishal Purohit. Vishal is the founder and CEO of Wooqer. Wooqer is a very interesting SaaS company, and we'll try to dive more into what Wooqer does. But importantly, we're going to discuss how to think about products and how to think about a product mindset and a product culture with Vishal. Vishal, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Hemang, for having me this morning. And I have listened to your podcast before. You're doing a great job by trying to make it so relatable and so useful to people on a daily basis. So glad that we could make this happen.
Yeah. Thanks. So, Vishal, I want to let's say let's start with what Wooker does, and maybe
Sure.
this way you can inform us about how you think about people using software.
Sure. So in a nutshell, Wooker is a marketplace for business apps. So think of it like your Play Store or App Store, where there are various opportunities for digitization in our daily work life. So if I'm a manager of any type, if I'm trying to get my audit sorted, if I'm trying to get my daily checklist sorted, either I can develop them on my own. I can second best choice I have is use a spreadsheet. Third best choice, which mostly I'm doing today, is use pen and paper. So if I'm trying to digitize those, I can go to the Wooker marketplace and look for opportunities to subscribe to something that's already pre-built. And just like any other marketplace, there are people who are creating these work apps at the back. They are experts in their own field. Most of them, many of them, in fact, 99% of them are not Wooker people. These are people who are experts in the field. So Wooker gives them a tool set to translate their ideas and their expertise in form of a work app and put it on the marketplace. So pretty much like a app store, where app store gives you an SDK to take on what you want to create. So if you want to create an app to remind people to drink water, you can create that app and park it on the app store. And there's somebody somewhere in the world, in fact more than 60 million people, who feel a need to use that particular app, and they discover it on the marketplace, and maybe it helps them live their life better, drink more water, stay healthy, something that was not possible in a software development environment, because nobody would come up with a requirement that I want an app or I want a software to remind me to drink water. So in a similar way, Wooker is this marketplace for business apps, where apps are created by people who are experts in the field. Wooker categorizes and makes these apps discoverable by the managers in various companies or at various enterprises. So that's the business of Wooker.
Now, how do you take care of data compatibility? Because let's say if I take the accounting example, someone is running that firm, they have data in a certain format and they have certain processes. Now they notice a gap. Maybe it is a checklist gap.
Right.
They're like, hey, we need a better checklist. And they find that what are the checklist apps available? Now, how do they know which one is compatible, for their workflow and which ones are not?
So most of these are standalone ideas. So what you're looking at mostly is digitizing what you already have in spreadsheets or pen and paper. So by definition, most of these workflows are not connected to anything else. So if you look at a spreadsheet and you're trying to, so you have optimized your process for a spreadsheet or pen and paper. So for example, if you look at a piece of paper, people try to maximize the use of every corner of a paper, right? So they draw a line and say this is for office use only. They create a small box at the top right, because they're trying to optimize the medium. Now, when we come to digital, you do not have those constraints of cost of a paper or space on a paper. You have a more fluid flow, you have more opportunities to be expansive. So you take the same workflow and you port it on Wooker, utilizing the opportunities given by the digital flows or mobile flows or your computer flows. And it becomes much more easier, much more traceable. So to answer your question, There's no data compatibility issue. What we do is we do allow people or enable people rather to bring in their CSV files, bring in their spreadsheets, and kind of pull it into the system and read those sheets. So we allow those type of APIs. We allow APIs where people can engage our infrastructure with something that already exists. So they can have an API integration for data transfer. So that's the standard API integration. But more and more, Wooker's focus is a lot like Canva, where people who are underserved in digitization, because organizational flows are fairly well digitized by IT teams and other folks.
Yeah.
But it is that under the radar digitization that people do on their desktops and in pen and paper, or they don't do it, or a lot of them are doing it in messaging apps. So that digitization is more organized on Wooker. So in that sense, if a closer example is Canva for animation. So something that they did for Soho user, somebody who just needs to create a flyer and put it up on their small shop, and they just want to make it look better. So Wooker is the target market is more like Canvas, and while enterprise users are the primary target or primary audience for Wooker, but the enterprise itself today is not a target profile for Wooker. It's the people within the enterprise. So if that helps you understand that.
Oh, it does. So I'm a Canva user, and I uh, do it for a variety of things. It makes the idea for someone like me who's not a graphic designer, like I can do it yourself. Like that DIY mentality for me.
Right.
I believe that's what you're doing with Wooker, right?
Absolutely.
Is another way also, like the way you are thinking. Just realize is another way of describing it as, are you building like Lego blocks for different purposes?
I think you kind of deciphered how we started Wooker. In fact, when we started Wooker, one of the largest pictures in our office was that of a box of Legos. And the inspiration was how do we create building blocks that partner with people's imagination and create things that are useful to them, which give them joy, which give them productivity, and which basically get their job done. So this focus on helping people get their job done is the central theme of Wooker. Canva pretty much works on a similar scenario that if you have a small idea or imagination, you do not have to wait for an expert to find time for you or invest that type of money to get it done. So that's a very close analogy of Lego you brought in.
But how does it work for software? Because generally speaking, whenever you talk of software, people like to go to the high tech world, which means intentionally or unintentionally you bring about complexity, you bring about customizations. To me, that flies in the face of DIY.
You are absolutely right, Hemang, and that's one of the principles of Wooker, and that's why some of these things take their own time when you are trying to digitize things at scale. So last two times there was digitization at scale was when people started using emails, and when people started using the MS Office or the spreadsheets and the word processors. So these were, I think, two of the largest at scale digitization phenomenons. Now, both of them are ridiculously simple. You might have over the years added more features, some emojis here and there, but emails have stayed like this for last 30 years, and there hasn't been much of a change. And there may be newer versions of that, but it's more of the same. So, in a similar way, what we are doing with Wooker is we are taking a step back and we are not trying to be best in the world at the end product or out product. So we are not trying to say that we are an ERP or a CRM or something. It is somebody who's en route to having a CRM can use Wooker as a stand-in till such a time they need to have such specific requirements where complexity walks in, which is where Wooker walks back. So it's kind of again like Lego blocks. The example you took, Lego blocks by definition are rectangular. So you can create a fairly good looking tower, But if you want a perfectly round tower, Lego blocks offer some amount of constraint there. And you can achieve your goal, but if your need is to have a perfectly circular tower, maybe you need to go back and look at another process outside of Lego and serve your purposes. But if it is sufficient for your job to have a tower that has some corners, I think Legos are the way to go, because you can again disassemble them, reuse them as many times as you want. So I think that complexity gets added based on how important it is for somebody to achieve that last level of perfection. So if I'm just trying to use a small form to collect data and I might not use it again, then I might not get too hooked about it as to how it integrates with various systems. I'll just use it, collect data, export it to an Excel sheet, and get it done well. So it's how you use these things again with Canva, because we have taken that example. You can do a lot with Canva, but you cannot do everything with Canva.
Agree.
Right? So this difference between everything and a lot is complexity, and something we choose to leave for better softwares, more complicated softwares, more purpose-built softwares to take care of.
I, I think in the research which I was doing, what you're saying, I'm just trying to connect the dots, because when I looked at your website, I see different verticals which are highlighted there, different businesses. And generally speaking, that is not the case for a lot of software companies. They specialize in one. I think you are at the point where it's like, okay, we'll get you to a good enough stage, maybe a great enough stage, but not the perfection stage which you want. And is that why you can deliver to different verticals, or is there another way to think about it?
There's another way to think about it, Hemang. So we'll again go back to Canva because it's an easier frame of
Sure.
reference, and we have used it a couple of times in this conversation. So if you look at a Canva website or a Canva app, you might feel that there are so many templates being built. And it might come to our minds that how is Canva, how is the company building so many templates? Or if you go to an app store for any somebody who's getting started, it might come to their mind, oh, this company is creating so many apps. So what you see on our website or on our marketplace is essentially things created by people who are experts in their fields. So what we are offering is a equivalent of a Canva tool to various of these people, and the stuff that you're seeing on the website is various designs they have created or they can possibly create. Hence, what Wooqer does not, so we are often associated to retail as an industry because that's where we did a lot of work in the past. And we have been told, in fact, some of the CEOs have talked to us and said, how do you know retail so well? You know the everyday retail better than a lot of big consultants. I said, Mr. XYZ, I'm sorry to inform, but we know nothing about retail. Hence, what you see is what is built by people like you who are expert retailers in their own field, somebody who has spent 20 years just doing those operations audits. Now, he chose to use Wooqer as a platform to translate his information or his expertise into a small app. And that is visible to you as something, oh, you guys are experts at this. Wooqer is an expert at helping this expert to create this. So does that give you a
Interesting.
sense
Yeah,
of?
it does. It does. So, but then as a marketplace, do you have to go about verifying whether this will really work? Meaning, I can be, let's say, a novice contributor, and I can, keep dumping things. Where like, I have this tool, I have that tool, but it may not be fully tested. It not be fully verified. Maybe it can even hurt someone's operation. Uh, so, from that perspective, do you have to step in and say, okay, is it worthy enough of pushing it out later, or like, what's the
So,
process then?
so Hemang, we have pretty much like any other market. So the basic idea of marketplace is democracy. Any marketplace works on democracy of both ideas being put there and ideas being sought. And that's the core tenet we cannot violate. Because if you try too hard to control the marketplace, it kind of goes different ways. That said, basic quality checks are built in into the tools. And before an app is published, we do go about those n number of pointed checkers so that it is not harmful in any form, because people can package some content which can be visually offending. So stuff that should not be there according to our policies is stripped out or is kind of given feedback to reinstate. But beyond that, somebody may come up with a genius app for something. It's again going back to Canva. It's my imagination as my vision of a star is a four-legged star. Now that's okay. That's creativity. So we'll put up there, and maybe again it's. I'll go back to that example of when I use this example a lot because it challenged my own way of thinking. When I looked at an app that was reminding people to drink water, my first reaction, unfortunately, and I have learned better, was to scoff at it.
Same here.
And I like what the etc. And then I went and I looked at as to why is there such an app, and I looked at near 100 million downloads, and I said I need to learn and I need to think better, because there are people who have unmet needs, and there are people who are experiencing those things and they're creating. So of the people, by the people, democratic balance, it's amazing. So just like we could not have possibly, I do not believe that any boardroom would have approved or any VC would have invested into a app to remind you to drink water. But somebody had the tool set to be able to create such an app, found it easy enough to put it in a marketplace. Some people discovered it. Maybe there was a network effect. Maybe there was a word of mouth, or maybe the need was so humongous that 100 people, and I've seen the evolution of those 2-3 apps that I've been following for 10 years or so, they've become businesses by themselves. Right? Think
Yeah.
about Angry Birds. In the traditional game publishing scenario, it was a difficult game to bring by to the public because obviously it uses a lot of touch and everything else, and the erstwhile gaming machines had a very tight, or those companies had a very tight control on what games go out, and because there was marketing involved. Same thing is happening with the OTT. So the democracy of a marketplace where somebody wants to say something, if they are what they are saying does not matter to anybody, nobody will watch it. So to answer your question, maybe a little longer, we want to keep marketplace true to its goals or true to its purpose, but the basic hygiene check of is it offending somebody, is it likely to have a negative impact on data of some sort, is it going to take away somebody's data, so stuff that we can check, we do check.
So Vishal, I want to. There's something which you said, which is a nice segue to the next part, which I wanted to discuss with you. So one is the pain point for every vertical. They can come from the users of that vertical. They can come
Absolutely.
from those domain experts. So, but as a marketplace now, then what are the pain points you focus on? What is it that you have to do which makes it worthwhile for people feeding that, hey, here's what I want to uh, push out to everyone else, through Wooqer?
Absolutely, that's a great question, Hemang. So that takes us into again the components of Wooker's infrastructure. So there are three main components. One component is what we call a one app that we give to the end user. Think of it like your phone, whether it's your iPhone or Apple or Android phone, that you put in the hands of a user. So essentially, you're selling a computer with the first app called the phone on it, right? So in that way, Wooker gives this so-called one app in some form that the user wants at that particular point of time. That app also gives the user an opening or an access to the marketplace. Again, pretty much like when you buy a phone or an iPad or any of these devices, you get access to the App Store or Marketplace or Play Store in that sense. So the second, that brings us to the second component of Wooqer, which is the marketplace itself. And then there is a third component, which is the publisher tools, the creation tools. So just like any company would have an SDK that you give to developers, we provide content creator tools for Learn apps. We provide process creator tools for work apps, and we provide APIs to other software companies to put tech apps into our marketplace. So the goals for each of these three categories is slightly different. With the one app, we are obsessed with this idea of how fast we can help the user get the job done. So if it took somebody to do a 100-pointer checklist in 20 minutes, we are trying to obsess over how do we make it 10 minutes. Now it could be enhancing the intuitiveness of that, doing some pre-filling. There could be some machine learning into it based on what they've done in the past. A magic is, for example, if every single day they put the same data on the same thing, I'm just giving you a small
Sure.
example. If you pre-fill it for them, now that saves them time to do that job. And there are a bunch of other things. There's a notification framework which plays its own role. So the idea there in this one app is how soon can the user do what they do, get the job done. And which also takes us to some AI. We don't do a whole lot of AI at the moment, but we have started to incorporate a little bit of components into it. So we are treating all of the work in this one app as a stream of work. And through some algorithms, we are figuring out this is the time of the day when Hemang likes to do a particular task. And if we serve this task to you at that point of the day, we are more likely to do it. So it is a combination of those several factors that make this one app obsessed over how do we help the user get the job done faster and smarter. Marketplace, it's pretty much the same goals that we have to make it discoverable, uncoverable, allow people to search for it, some amount of recommendations going into it. So that's a pretty standard marketplace goals. And on the tool side, we have a very clear goal of making it non-tech. So anybody without any programming knowledge should be able to package their content and put it on our marketplace, or be able to translate a process into a work app. So keep it very simple, DIY, create a lot of help for them. So we have started a certification program for these folks.
Wow.
So they undergo. So if you go on online, any of the social networks and search for Wooqer, you're likely to find over about 8,000-9,000 people calling Wooqer as a skill. So if you put a cursory search on LinkedIn, beyond our colleagues and everybody else, you're likely to find people who put Wooqer as a skill. And our objective is to help these people become better at what they do. Very recently, we launched a offline forum called Lessons from the Ground. We are doing this across the world. So last one was in Dubai, the next one is in South Africa, where we are pulling these people together who are our power users. And we are listening to them and we are making them listen to each other. And we are calling that series Lessons from the Ground. So doing a lot of those small things, we are pulling that feedback back into this third component, making those tools ridiculously easy to use. Again, the Canva type of environment, if they can produce simple day-to-day images or graphics, they'll be motivated to do more of it. And over a period of time, they'll refine their own skill.
Vishal, would you mind expanding on, let's say, the product culture you're building uh, at your company and how you go about it? Because I'll set some preamble. Because a lot of times when I meet startups, I work with startups on a fairly frequent basis.
Sure.
The founding team, the leadership team, they have a certain philosophy which more or less they're aligned on. At least the good or decent startups. The challenge is in percolating their mindset to their team as it grows up, because sometimes it takes a until the team size is about 8-10 people, that culture can permeate very well.
Right.
But once it goes from 10 to say 50 people or beyond, I think that's a big litmus test.
It
They
is.
don't translate that culture, then eventually you see that things tend to either taper off or they stay in that stuck state for a long time. So, how do you go about imbibing this product culture?
So that's a great question again, Hemang. There are about two or three components when we think about product culture. I think the first one is product thinking itself, and appreciate the word product has a very broad definition. And if we chase that entire definition, I do not think we can fit any conversation in a finite time. But we are taking product as something that is done for the first time. It could be a miniature idea, it could be a larger idea, but I'll take product as something being done for the first time. And product thinking in that sense is very simply marinated instinct and refined intuition. So you can learn some of the tools of the trade from trainings and other things, but the instinct and the intuition are the basics of any product thinking. So if you're hiring people just because they have a product management certificate from XYZ place, uh, or they have a lot of experience, I think that hiring process can be further refined to first look at, do they have product vision, product instincts. You don't need a whole lot of experience for it. You do not need any specific training for it. So I think that is something we are starting to do well first. The second big part of product thinking translating to product culture is having a broader definition of what you want and not breaking it down into projects and tasks. I know it's a little antithesis to modern way of software development, but I like to separate software development from product development. Software development is the execution part of it, highly disciplined, very well organized. So in this part, I think of product development more like movie making, right? So great movie directors, they bring on great people like photograph, great cinematographer, great choreographer, great action sequencer. They give them a broad view that this is what maybe I want, and then they give them space to excel. So when you see an awesome movie, it's just not the story or the script. Every part of it has played its own role. So I think a product culture, not uh, again separating product from the regimental software development or engineering. I think that's an important part. But once you look at the product part, not always thinking in terms of projects is an area. It's hard. It's hard on both the sides because when you have a team, you want them to deliver something, and when there's a team, it wants to deliver something. But again, giving them that opportunity that it's okay if you take a month more, but come up with something that you yourself are very excited about. So I think that space is an important part in product development, and then there's engineering, which is all about task management, projects, etc. etc. And the third and most important piece is letting the products fit in into the larger vision. 5 out of 10 times, people will come up with something fantastic, but it may not be aligned. So at those are the points where you create a system and you say a strict no, because individually that product might be exceptional, but if you're looking at a larger product, which is in our case our business, then we have to give that feedback that it's an exceptional product, what you have done, etc. Let's park it for a while, or maybe you continue working on it till it becomes more useful to us. So that compulsion to ship everything, if one can overcome that compulsion, I think you can do that. Again, the initial thought of more than what you can pack in, avoid what you can avoid packing in. So I think the way that culture shapes up is, I know those things help. if you can create an, for example, we have a very interesting Friday evening conversation every week where often we invite people who have nothing to do with software or product or technology. So, for example, we have had a heart surgeon come in and talk about how he goes about heart surgeries. We had somebody who was an agriculturist who came in, and that was a revelation as to how an agriculturist, how the tomatoes, which is a hot button right now, but how tomatoes and other things that we get on our dining table, what's that journey? How much thinking actually goes into it? And that makes our teams appreciate that, hey, everything has a process and that process of thinking. So I think marinating that culture, make a lot of mistakes. I think you have to by default have a culture which does not look down upon failures and mistakes. So I think those are key tenets of culture that we partly have been successful in building, and it's an ongoing journey for us.
This is interesting. So you're doing a lot of this cross pollination by having these Friday evenings that you're doing, and that may not lead to a direct impact today, but you never know what something can spark an imagination maybe a month later or 6 months later. Who knows? So one part is this cross pollination. I think my other takeaway was that when it comes to the product strategy, it is okay to be inefficient and let it take its time. Let's make sure we have some wide gaps, and but execution time, sure, at that point you want to be as efficient as possible. And how do the new joinees in your team, how do they start absorbing this? Because a lot of times I would think uh, their previous experiences are maybe orthogonal to what you're talking.
And you ask a very relevant question, Hemang, and this is something that we battle with all the time. And there's some data points I have. Uh, I wish I was 100% successful with my team too, but I would say I'm reasonably successful in this. So, some data points I have is if you look around, some of the best products that we use on a daily basis were created by people who are just out of college or while they were still in college.
Wow.
Right? So, whether you pick up your social networking tools, and there are zillions of products that we use on a daily basis. So, experience, if you're hiring for product, you have to be the person who walks in has to have a resume of observations that you can't even start to think about. Is the only time you hire people with experience in product. Most of the times you look for that curiosity and you look for those. So I would say younger people would be a better inflow into a product team with some amount of guidance, etc., etc. So in the product team, we have failed, we have made mistakes. If you go by designations and titles and what, they may not exactly have done product in the past. So I think focusing on that vision. So when we get new people, we also have seen that, for lack of a better word, freshers or youngsters who come from college, they have been able to immediately contribute more than the amount of unlearning that is required in other cases. So it's not entirely undoable, but for a company, it is relatively uh, less painful to induct youngsters and partner with their completely creative thinking and open thinking and translate it into better product features. In engineering, again, I'm separating product from engineering. Engineering, you need the best engineers at what they do. And it's fairly easy to assess that and understand that.
Yeah. Interesting. So if someone is starting from a clean slate, you know naturally they would be like, where do I learn this from? Because learning how to observe is also an art. Like, some people have it in them, but I also believe it can be learned over time.
It can be.
So and again, knowing you, I think you're always a very curious person. Like, so what are some of the books, tools, or it could be movies also, where you think that, hey, watch this thing to get better at observing, to get better at this product thinking or product mindset.
I may have a much simpler answer to that, Hemang, for myself. Just looking at what you like and what you like can be a good starting point. So, if you like a particular type of food or a particular food or dish from a particular place, if you like a particular movie, if somebody is completely besotted by how we did this recent Chandrayaan launch, today the amount of content available about behind the scenes of those is just phenomenal volume of content. So I think I would first look at what I like in what I like and what was behind the scenes in creating what I liked in what I like. I think that can be one area that you can look at. I am personally a big fan of how people thought the movie scenes of my best movies, what were people thinking when they built a particular bridge, whatever challenges they. So if you keep on looking at these things, it refines or marinates your instincts and intuition. You need to have good instincts to begin with. You can't simply learn that 100% of the time. Once that happens, some of the areas that you can look at, some of the tools you can look at is these podcasts, like one of yours, is a great tool to hear from people who are doing it every day. So I think with that objective is very good. There are some books like The Design of Everyday Things. There are more popular ones which give you one or two ideas, like Hooked and other things. But if you simply just immerse yourself in this behind the scenes, talk to practitioners, the amount of content on digital media with this type of podcasts is phenomenal. I'm personally a big fan of Masters of Scale podcast. I believe in that half an hour or 40 minutes, you get to learn more than 500 books that you can learn with. Uh, so I think those two, three books, if somebody's interested in, there are obviously a lot of structured programs these days. So more online learning where universities have expanded their knowledge in form of coursework to be able to do it online from anywhere. I think there's nothing wrong with doing those because it at least gives you a structure to basic terms, terminologies to think about. But just talk to people of various from various walks of life. Be very interested in what you're interested in.
It's a great tip.
Because I meet a lot of people and often, okay, what do you like? I love movies. Oh, okay, that's a great thing. Okay, what are your top three movies? They either do not have a very automatic answer to that, or they have to labor too much, which means they're interested loosely in that area, but they're not interested in their interest. So if we discovered that my interest is X, and if you kind of chase it, and with I keep on repeating this, the volume of possibilities that we have at this digital distribution, it's just unimaginable. So to be able to pull out a drop from this whole ocean that is of your interest is easy these days. So look for those items, ideas, talk to people. A lot of smaller podcasts, a lot of smaller people who aren't Reid Hoffmans, but have equally good amount of knowledge to share, practical knowledge to share. It's like those indie movies we find on OTT
True.
that you are not looking for, but you saw it and you say, "Wow, this was cool." So I think searching for, I'll repeat that, chasing your interest and what you're interested may be a good. It will get you the right books. It will get you the right ideas.
Yeah. And I think this is one interesting part which again interact with a lot of students, and I'm like, don't be ashamed that you like movies or you like sports. a lot of people think that "Arey, it's a stigma. I need to tell that I'm only interested about my hardcore technical skills and only need to bring those to the front. Make sure that's fine. If you have that, talk about it. But all these other domains which are there, they're there for a reason. If you dig deep into them, you'll find amazing technicalities that will elevate you to the next level. And
Yeah,
your natural interest is, you're causing a resonance for you to learn the best from.
absolutely. And in that direction, some of the recent texts that I have seen, for example, STEM is now being called STEAM. So they've added an A to the STEM, and A stands for arts. So I think there's a realization that STEM without arts cannot translate to complete creativity. So STEM has become STEAM. You will see more and more pure engineering programs uh, mashing up as more liberal arts plus engineering programs. So I think that left brain, right brain balance is being understood, recognized, and it has started to make way into our education systems rather. Hence, to your point, there's absolutely you can be very interested in how do roads stay so clean, and there's nothing to be ashamed about. You can be interested in movies, you can be interested in a particular type of whatever your interest is. It may not be legal too, but be very interested in your interest. Obviously, the advice is not to go and create any
Yeah.
type of harm.
Sure. Vishal, we can discuss this like to another extent also. I think, and knowing you, this conversation can go on much longer. But I think you've given a lot of actionable insights to people. So thank you so much for sharing with that, and thank you for sharing the behind the scenes understanding of what goes on at Wooqer. I think a lot of folks who are into software particularly, but even if they are not, I think what Vishal shared with us about uh, building teams, about working with them, inspiring them where to be efficient, where to be okay to let go a bit, and where to be ruthless. I think that's an art which can translate to anything that we are working on. Whether you are in the technical domain or non-technical, I think these learnings will apply. So thanks much again, Vishal, for joining me today and for discussing these things.
Thanks for having me, Hemang, and always wonderful to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Good day.